Islam is the second largest religion in India, with 14.2% of the country's population, or roughly 172 million people, identifying as adherents. Islam first came to the western coast of India with Arab traders as early as the 7th century AD to coastal Malabar, and the Konkan-Gujarat.Cheraman Juma Masjid in Kerala is thought to be the first mosque in India, built in 629 AD by Malik and Dinar. Following an expedition from the governor of Bahrain to Bharuch in the 7th century AD, immigrant Arab and Persian trading communities from South Arabia and the Persian Gulf began settling in coastal Gujarat. Islam arrived in North India in the 12th century with Turkish invasions and has since become a part of India's religious and cultural heritage. Over the centuries, there has been significant integration of Hindu and Muslim cultures across India, and the Muslims have played a prominent role in India's economic rise and cultural influence. Early history of Islam in India. Trade relations have existed between Arabia and the Indian subcontinent since ancient times. Even in the pre-Islamic era, Arab traders used to visit the Konkan-Gujarat coast and Malabar region, which linked them with the ports of Southeast Asia. Newly Islamized Arabs were Islam's first contact with India. The historians Eliot and Dowson say in the book The History of India as told by its own historians, the first ship bearing Muslim travelers was seen on the Indian coast as early as 630 AD. H. G. Rawlinson, in his book Ancient and Medieval History of India, claims the first Arab Muslims settled on the Indian coast in the last part of the 7th century AD. Sheikh Zainuddin Makdum's Turfat al-Mujahideen is also a reliable work. This fact is corroborated by J. Starrick in his South Kanara and Madras districts manuals, and also by Haridas Bhattacharya in Cultural Heritage of India Volume IV. It was with the advent of Islam that the Arabs became a prominent cultural force in the world. The Arab merchants and traders became the carriers of the new religion, and they propagated it wherever they went. The first Indian mosque, Cheraman Juma Masjid, is thought to have been built in 629 AD by Malik bin Dinar. In Malabar, the Mapilas may have been the first community to convert to Islam. Intensive missionary activities were carried out along the coast, and many natives also embraced Islam. These new converts were now added to the Mapila community. Thus, among the Mapilas, we find both the descendants of the Arabs through local women and the converts from among the local people. In the 8th century, the province of Sindh was conquered by an Arab army led by Muhammad bin Qasim. Sindh became the easternmost province of the Umayyad Caliphate. In the first half of the 10th century, Mahmud of Ghazni added the Punjab to the Ghaznavid Empire and conducted 17 raids on modern-day India. In the 11th century, Ghazi Sayyid Salam Masood played a significant role in the conversion of locals to Islam. A more successful invasion came at the end of the 12th century by Muhammad of Ghor. This eventually led to the formation of the Delhi Sultanate. Arab-Indian interactions. There is much historical evidence to show that Arabs and Muslims interacted with India and Indians from the very early days of Islam, if not before the arrival of Islam in Arabia. Arab traders transmitted the numeral system developed by Indians to the Middle East and Europe. Many Sanskrit books were translated into Arabic as early as the 8th century. George Saliba writes in his book Islamic Science and the Making of the European Renaissance that some major Sanskrit texts began to be translated during the reign of the second Abbasid Caliph al-Mansur, if not before, some texts on logic even before that, and it has been generally accepted that the Persian and Sanskrit texts, few as they were indeed the first to be translated. Political history of Islam in India. For further details see History of India, Delhi Sultanate, Gujarat Sultanate, Deccan Sultanates. The first independent sultanate in central Indian region of the Deccan was the Bahmani Sultanate. Later this broke down into a number of different kingdoms collectively known as Deccan Sultanates. Main articles: Ahmednagar Sultanate, Bidar Sultanate, Berar Sultanate, Bijapur Sultanate, Golconda Sultanate, Mughal Empire. Post-Mughal era. For decline of Muslim politics in India see Maratha Confederacy, East India Company, role in Indian independence movement. The contribution of Muslim revolutionaries, poets and writers is documented in the struggle for independence. Titu Mir raised a revolt against British. Abul Kalam Azad, Hakim Ajmal Khan and Rafi Ahmed Kidwai Muslims who engaged in this purpose. Muhammad Ashfaq Ullah Khan of Shahjahanpur conspired to loot the British treasury at Kakuri. Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan was a noted nationalist who spent 45 of his 95 years of life in jail. Barakatullah of Bhopal was one of the founders of the Ghadar Party, which created a network of anti-British organizations. Saeed Rahmat Shah of the Ghadar Party worked as an underground revolutionary in France and was hanged for his part in the unsuccessful Ghadar uprising in 1915. Ali Ahmad Siddiqui of Faizabad planned the Indian Mutiny in Malaya and Burma, along with Saeed Mujtaba Hussain of Jaunpur, and was hanged in 1917. Vakam Abdul Qadir of Kerala participated in the Quit India struggle in 1942, and was hanged. Umar Subhani, an industrialist and millionaire of Bombay, provided Gandhi with Congress expenses and ultimately died for the cause of independence. Among Muslim women, Hazrat Mahal, Asghari Begum, Biama contributed in the struggle for independence from the British. The first ever Indian rebellion against the British saw itself in the Vellore Mutiny of 10 July 1806, which left around 200 British officers and troops dead or injured, but it was subdued by the British, and the mutineers and the family of Tipu Sultan, who were incarcerated in the Vellore fort at the time, had to pay a heavy price. It predates the Indian Rebellion of 1857. And as a result of the Sepoy Mutiny, mostly the upper-class Muslim rebels were targeted by the Britishers, as under their leadership the war was mostly fought in and around Delhi. Thousands of kith and kins were shot or hanged near the gate of Red Fort is Delhi, which is now known as Kuni Darwaza. The renowned Urdu poet Mirza Ghalib has given a vivid description of such executions in his letters now published by the Oxford University Press. Ghalib, his life and letters compiled and translated by Ralph Russell and Gurshidul Islam. As the Muslim power waned with the gradual demise of the Mughal Empire, the Muslims of India faced a new challenge, that of protecting the culture and interests, yet interacting with the alien, technologically advantaged power. In this period, the ulama of Firangi Mahal, based first at Saifali in district Barabanki, and, since the 1690s, based in Lucknow, educated and guided the Muslims. The Firangi Mahal led and steered the Muslims of India. Other famous Muslims who fought for independence against the British rule: Abul Kalam Azad, Mahmud Hassan of Darul Uloom Deoband, who was implicated in the famous Siltlet conspiracy to overthrow the British through an armed struggle; Hussain Ahmad Madani, a former Sheikh al-Hadith of Darul Uloom Deoband; Ubaidullah Sindhi, Hakim Ajmal Khan, Hasrat Mahani, Saeed Mahmud, Professor Maulavi Barkatullah, Zakir Hussain, Saifuddin Kichlu, Vakam Abdul Qadir, Manzoor Abdul Wahab, Bahadur Shah Zafar, Hakim Nusrat Hussain, Khan Abdul Ghaffar Khan, Abdul Samad Khan Achakzai, Colonel Shahnawaz, M.A. Ansari, Rafi Ahmad Kidwai, Fakhruddin Ali Ahmad, and Sahawani, Taksharwani. Durrani, Nawab Viqar-ul-Mulk, Nawab Mohsen al-Mulk, Mustafa Hussain, VM Ubaidullah, Senior Rahim Badruddin Taibji, Abid Hassan and Maulvi Abdul Hamid. Until 1920, Muhammad Ali Jinnah was a member of the Indian National Congress and was part of the independence struggle. Allama Muhammad Iqbal, poet and philosopher, was a strong proponent of Hindu-Muslim unity and an undivided India perhaps until 1930. Hussain Shahid Suhrawardi was also active in the Indian National Congress in Bengal during his early political career. Muhammad Ali Jinnah and Shaukat Ali struggled for the emancipation of the Muslims in the overall Indian context, and struggled for independence alongside Mahatma Gandhi and Abdul Bari Firangi Mahal. Until the 1930s, the Muslims of India broadly conducted the politics alongside the countrymen, in the overall context of an undivided India. Partition of India. The partition of India was the partition of British India on the basis of religious demographics. This led to the creation of the sovereign states of the Dominion of Pakistan and the Union of India. The Indian Independence Act 1947 had decided the 15th of August 1947 as the appointed date for the partition. However, Pakistan celebrates its day of creation on the 14th of August. The partition of India was set forth in the Indian Independence Act 1947 and resulted in the dissolution of the British Indian Empire and the end of the British Raj. It resulted in a struggle between the newly constituted states of India and Pakistan and displaced up to 12.5 million people, with estimates of loss of life varying from several hundred thousand to a million. The violent nature of the partition created an atmosphere of mutual hostility and suspicion between India and Pakistan that plagues their relationship to this day. The partition included the geographical division of the Bengal province into East Bengal, which became part of the Dominion of Pakistan. West Bengal became part of India, and a similar partition of the Punjab province became West Punjab and East Punjab. The partition agreement also included the division of Indian government assets, including the Indian Civil Service, the Indian Army, the Royal Indian Navy, the Indian Railways and the Central Treasury, and other administrative services. The two self-governing countries of India and Pakistan legally came into existence at the stroke of midnight on 14-15 August 1947. The ceremonies for the transfer of power were held a day earlier in Karachi, at the time the capital of the new state of Pakistan, so that the last British Viceroy, Lord Mountbatten of Burma, could attend both the ceremony in Karachi and the ceremony in Delhi. Thus, Pakistan's Independence Day is celebrated on the 14th of August and India's on the 15th of August. After partition of India in 1947, two-thirds of the Muslims resided in Pakistan but a third resided in India. Some critics allege that British haste in the partition process increased the violence that followed. Because independence was declared prior to the actual partition, it was up to the new governments of India and Pakistan to keep public order. No large population movements were contemplated. The plan called for safeguards for minorities on both sides of the new border. It was a task at which both states failed. There was a complete breakdown of law and order. Many died in riots, massacre, or just from the hardships of the flight to safety. What ensued was one of the largest population movements in recorded history. According to Richard Simmons, at the lowest estimate, 500,000 people perished and 12 million became homeless. However, many argue that the British were forced to expedite the partition by events on the ground. Once in office, Mountbatten quickly became aware if Britain were to avoid involvement in a civil war, which seemed increasingly likely, there was no alternative to partition and a hasty exit from India. Law and order had broken down many times before partition, with much bloodshed on both sides. A massive civil war was looming by the time Mountbatten became viceroy. After the Second World War, Britain had limited resources, perhaps insufficient to the task of keeping order. Another viewpoint is that while Mountbatten may have been too hasty, he had no real options left and achieved the best he could under difficult circumstances. The historian Lawrence James concurs that in 1947 Mountbatten was left with no option but to cut and run. The alternative seemed to be involvement in a potentially bloody civil war from which it would be difficult to get out. Conservative elements in England consider the partition of India to be the moment that the British Empire ceased to be a world power. Following Curzon's dictum, the loss of India would mean that Britain dropped straight away to a third-rate power. Population. India's Muslim population is the world's third largest and the world's largest Muslim minority population. Officially, India has the third largest Muslim population next to Indonesia and Pakistan. India is home to 10% of the world's Muslim population. India has around 172 million Muslims. Estimates show India may have more Muslims than Pakistan, though 2016 census in Pakistan will give the exact figure, as overall population of Pakistan is estimated at around 191.71 million. Muslim populations by Pew data compiled as of 2011. Muslims represent a majority of the local population in Lakshadweep and Jammu and Kashmir. The largest concentration, about 47% of all Muslims in India, live in the three states of Uttar Pradesh, West Bengal, and Bihar. High concentrations of Muslims are found in states of Assam, Kerala, Maharashtra, Jharkhand, Karnataka, and Telangana. Muslim population by states. As of 2015, Muslims comprise the majority of the population in the only Indian state of Jammu and Kashmir and in a union territory Lakshadweep. In 110 minority-concentrated districts, at least a fifth of the population are Muslim. Muslim populations by Indian state. 2011 census. The census 2011 results of Mamaram, Par-Omata and Pural subdivisions of Senapati district of Manipur were withheld due to administrative reasons. The figures have now been finalized. Population growth rate. Muslim population growth per census 1981 census. Parts of Assam were not included in the 1981 census data due to violence in some districts. 1991 census. Jammu and Kashmir was not included in the 1991 census data due to militant activity in the state. 2011 census. Estimated populations of Muslims in India as religious demographics has still not been released by Government of India. Muslims in India have a much higher total fertility rate compared to that of other religious communities in the country. The growth of Muslims in India has risen from about 10% in 1951 to 14.4% by 2013. The Muslim population growth rate is higher by more than 10% of the total growth compared to that of Hindus. However, since 1991, the largest decline in fertility rates among all religious groups in India has occurred among Muslims. The population growth rate is also attributable to the fact that a majority of Muslim populations are concentrated in the states that are lagging behind in social reforms and services which have shown higher birth rates than other states. However, However, the Sakha Committee report shows that the Muslim population growth has slowed down and will be on par with national averages. Social and economic reasons behind population growth. Demographers have put forward several factors behind high birth rates among Muslims in India. Another reason for high fertility rate among Muslims is they have the youngest median age compared to other religious groups in India. According to sociologists Roger and Patricia Jeffrey, socio-economic conditions rather than religious determinism is the main reason for higher Muslim birth rates. Indian Muslims are poorer and less educated compared to the Hindu counterparts. Noted Indian sociologist B.K. Prasad argues that since India's Muslim population is more urban compared to the Hindu counterparts, infant mortality rates among Muslims is about 12% lower than those among Hindus. However, other sociologists point out that religious factors can explain high Muslim birth rates. Surveys indicate that Muslims in India have been relatively less willing to adopt family planning measures and that Muslim women have a larger fertility period since they get married at a much younger age compared to Hindu women. On the other hand, it is also documented that Muslims tend to adopt family planning measures. A study conducted by K.C. Zachariah in Kerala in 1983 revealed that on average, the number of children born to a Muslim woman was 4.1 while a Hindu woman gave birth to only 2.9 children. Religious customs and marriage practices were cited as some of the reasons behind the high Muslim birth rate. According to Paul Kurtz, Muslims in India are much more resistant to modern contraception than are Hindus and, as a consequence, the decline in fertility rate among Hindu women is much higher compared to that of Muslim women. The National Family and Health Survey conducted in 1998-99 highlighted that Indian Muslim couples consider a substantially higher number of children to be ideal for a family as compared to Hindu couples in India. The same survey also pointed out the percentage of couples actively using family planning measures was more than 49% among Hindus against 37% among Muslims.